After God of War, Uncharted is the next title where HDR is a little bit, how should I say, complicated.
Indian Army's not messing around.
Let me make one thing very clear. I love the HDR implementation in Uncharted, especially the very beginning from the Lost Legacy. It is just a dream to play this game on an OLED TV with the right settings and, more important, with the right HDR picture mode. Because in my opinion, HDHG and Uncharted, that's a very big no. HDR in Uncharted is mastered up to 10,000 nits. In this example here, the game would actually ask a display to output almost 9,500 nits, which of course is way too much for the LG CX, and that's the reason why, sometimes HDR just looks a little bit odd. Not just with HDHG, even dynamic tone mapping on sometimes struggles a lot to display a correct information. I mean, no wonder it is just too much information for this TV. And unfortunately, in terms of the HDR settings, we don't have much of a choice. Unfortunately, Uncharted does not support the HDR calibration menu on the PlayStation 5. It really doesn't matter what you set up here, because there is no difference at all. In this example here, I have set up the PlayStation 5 calibration menu in the correct way with HDHG turned on, and the game would actually ask right now to output 4,300 candela or nits. In this example here, I have set up the PlayStation 5 calibration menu in the complete wrong way, but still the game is asking to output 4,300 candela. The only setting what we have in this game to control HDR at least a little bit, and I really just talking about a little bit, it's not that much, is the brightness setting. And brightness in this case really means brightness. Yes, it changes also the maximum peak brightness from HDR, but not in a way as we like it or as we actually would need it, okay? And by the way, this is exactly the same when you use SDR. There's no difference at all. So really just one setting called brightness. Keep in mind that during my whole testing I never changed the position from the car or from my colorimeter what was measuring the sun. All what I have done is I changed the settings, the brightness setting in the game, what you can see here on the top. 0 in this case means brightness is set to 0, and at this very moment the game is asking to output 1300 nits, and I was able to measure 650 nits. With brightness set to 1, the game is actually asking to output 1800 nits, and I was able to measure 660 nits. So we have already a little bit of an improvement or a higher peak luminance. With brightness set to 2, the game is asking to output 2300 nits, and still the same output in terms of the maximum peak luminance, 660 candela. Brightness set to 3, the game is asking output almost 3000 nits, but I was still just able to measure 660 candela. So between 1, 2 and 3, there's actually no improvement anymore in terms of the maximum peak luminance. But where we having some of our improvement is in terms of the shadow quality. When we're just focusing on the tires here and on the fender, and I'm just jumping up from 0 to 3, you can actually see how much shadow details we're actually gaining without losing anything in terms of the maximum peak brightness. With the brightness set to 4, the game would actually ask to output 3500 nits, and I was able to measure 640 nits. A little bit less compared to number 3, where I was able to measure 660 nits. With brightness setting 5, the game is asking to output almost 4000 nits, and again I measured less compared to number 4. Just 640 nits with brightness set to 5. And this would go on like this all the time till we actually reach 10, where the game is asking to output 6500 nits, and the maximum peak luminance what I was able to measure on the bright object is just 470 nits at this very moment. And the explanation for this is actually quite simple. When we're increasing the brightness in this game, we're getting much better shadow details. As you can see here, between 10 and 0, there's a big difference. But the problem is, because we're adding so much more additional brightness to the picture. My LG CX is not capable anymore at some point to display this bright object with the maximum peak luminance, and in this case it is when we're changing the brightness from 3 to 4, because you can see number 4 is 640 candela and number 3, brightness set to 3, is 660 candela. What is my recommendation now? What brightness setting should you use? And as always, it depends of course on your display, on your environment, because if you play in a very, very bright room, then probably my recommended setting for me personally is number 3, and maybe it's not for you. That means the brighter your room is, the higher you have to go actually to see something in very dark areas. But also keep in mind, the brighter you get here, the less contrast, the less dynamic range you get, and at some point it just doesn't look good anymore in my opinion. I found really the best setting for me in a almost pitch black room is number 3, because I have a very, very high contrast between dark areas and very bright objects. I'm not losing anything in terms of the maximum peak brightness, as we have seen in this example what I showed you. So for me, number 3 is really, really nice. But my recommendation is actually between number 2 and number 4. So don't use number 0 or 0, because you will actually lose maximum peak brightness, and also from 5 on, at least on my TV, it is getting really, really bad in terms of the maximum peak brightness, and also you will lose contrast and dynamic range. So again, between let's say number 2 and number 4, that's my recommendation. Before we end this video, let me explain to you why you shouldn't use HDR at all, and the simple answer is because it is just way too dark in my opinion. So the game in general is already very, very dark, but with HDR, as you can see, it is in my opinion almost unplayable in certain situations. And even you play in a very or in a complete pitch black room, just keep in mind, then with different scenarios, HDR will make the picture looks very dull in my opinion, because at this very moment this is supposed to be a very nice sunny day, but with HDR just too dark, very, very boring in my opinion. My recommendation is still dynamic tone mapping on. Okay my friends, that's it for this video. I say thank you very much for watching me, and if you're new to my channel, please do me a big favor, like and subscribe, and also share my content. I would much appreciate it. And now let's end the video with a little bit of gameplay material from this great escape scene. And this so far was my favorite part from the game, I have to admit it. Great HDR effects, great gameplay. I mean, the whole game is just amazing in my opinion. But I don't want to spoil it too much, so let's end it here. You should play it on your own. Thank you very much. I see you guys next time. Bye.